You're watching The Ready Writer, a show where I get to speak to writers of all different genres, mediums, and experiences. The Ready Writer. Are you ready?
Hello and welcome to The Ready Writer. I am your host, Casey Bell, and today's guest is Marcel Daane. Let's get this show started. Did you grow up writing and wanting to be an author, or was this something that came about later in life?
Oh, that's a great question. So for me, being a writer, I always have had an affinity for writing. It's always helped me kind of manage my own thoughts. One of the reasons is because I actually grew up with clinical depression and anxiety, and so writing my words on paper and my thoughts out on paper, even as a young child, was really helpful. And a lot of it was driven because I also grew up in political exile. So my mother is a political activist, and so I ended up kind of living countryless, so to speak, in political exile. And so as a young child, I had some different experiences as the average other kid would have, and I think that's what really attracted me to writing and creating. I do have a very creative mind, and so that was always kind of on my mind. But I never really had that kind of thought of like, oh, I want to be an author or anything like that. That came later in life. Yeah.
So your first book that you did publish, when did you decide to actually publish a book and why?
The first book that I published is called Headstrong Performance, and the reason why I published that book, it actually came from research that I was doing. I did my master's degree in neuroscience, but as part of my research project, I got to study the brains of leaders. And in that research of studying the brains of these senior leaders, I discovered that even though these people are hired into kind of high powered positions and all of that kind of stuff, there was something that we're doing in the current corporate structure that is not allowing the brains of our talents to flourish. And actually, on the contrary, so the brains of our leaders, including deteriorate, and so in my research, I was investigating what is causing this rapid, and I call it brain aging. So kind of the brains just perform slower and slower, and at the end of the day, it all just comes down to some really basic stuff that we need to be doing to protect our brains from deteriorating when we're working in a stressful environment or anything. Or think about the environment that we're living in today, right? With COVID, what are some of the things that we can do to protect our brains? And so my research really just kind of pointed to the basic fundamentals of mindfulness practice, eating well, getting enough sleep, just doing all of those kind of things that can help us protect ourselves. And when I finished my research, I really felt that there was a story here that needed to be told with regards to how are we actually treating our talent in corporations, and what are we actually doing. And I didn't see a lot of literature out there, kind of just laying out the science and saying, hey, this is what's happening, right, to our people. And so I wanted to tell that story. Plus, I had this ton of research, that I had after my master's. And so I thought, hey, to hell with it. I'm just gonna write a book. So that's kind of how it started. Yeah. And so I wrote that in 2014. I think it got published in 2015. Yeah. And so that was my start of my authoring. Yeah. So it was all good.
Cool. So I know by 2015, there were 3 ways to publish a book. When you decided to publish a book, were you aware of those ways? Did you know what you were doing, or did you fall in unsure and knew you would figure it out?
A little bit of all three, actually. I knew that I wanted to tell the story, and I knew that I wanted to write this book. And so I knew I was going to publish it. But how I was going to publish the book, that was a bit of a different story. And so yes, there were three options for me, right? So there was the first option, of course, was to seek a publisher and to go through a publishing house, kind of in the traditional routes. The second way was to kind of find a hybrid publisher, which is kind of a person that you pay, company that you pay, and then they kind of take care of your publishing for you. And then the third route was to do everything myself. And after I'd done a little bit of research, I was really fascinated by the process of actually creating a book. And so I decided for my first book to do kind of route 3, which was just to do it completely by myself. So what that means is that I started the whole project of not just writing the book, but also hiring the editors. I had 4 different editors that worked with me in different stages of the book. The graphic design person for designing the cover, all of those kind of things, and then eventually taking care of distribution. And it was a phenomenal learning experience, just that whole process of publishing a book. And I think that was an extremely helpful process for me, especially when I wrote my second one, because there were some critical mistakes that I made in my first one, and that I felt, with my second one, I don't want to make those same errors. So at the second book, though, I got lucky because the publishing house actually reached out to me. It was Penguin Books. They reached out to me, and they actually asked if I could write the second book, which was The 5 Energies of Horrible Bosses. And that was a completely different experience. Also, it was my first time going through, the full-fledged, so kind of option 1, right? The full-fledged. So now I've had two of the 3 options. I still need to do option 2, so, which might happen. I don't know. So, it's been a really interesting process so far.
Well, with that said, give us the pros and cons of both. Going the first way and the third way.
The pros of option 3, right, which is the just kind of completely do it by yourself type approach, is that you have complete freedom over how you want your book to look. You also have the rights of the entire book. Meaning that from a copyright standpoint, from if there are any innovations in there or anything like that, so you own everything. Plus, you also own 100% of the book sales. So if you're an accomplished writer, or you have very good kind of understanding of how to distribute your book well, that could be a very viable route to just have complete control over the development of the book. The downside of that, though, is that from some of the authors that I've known as well to operate in option 3, one of the challenges is quality control. And one of my goals when I wrote, especially coming from a neuroscience background, and writing a book about the brain, about neuroscience, I wanted to make the book very easy to read, and it had to just be nice and simple, and just one of those reads you can read on an airplane, right? And when I wrote the first draft of my book, which I finished in 2 months, my first editor came back and just went, "Oh, this is way too complicated. You got to dumb this down. You got to simplify the hell out of this thing, because it's way too complicated." And so it took me another 8 to 10 months to actually get the book ready for publishing. And my first editor, he gave me some really sound advice. He says, "Don't publish the book when it's finished. Publish the book when it's ready." And I took that to heart, and I think that's a really important factor of book writing, and I think that's that can be a pro, but it generally can also be a con. The pros and cons of going through a publishing house, what I found is the pros is that everything is lined up for you. So as an author, all you have to do is write the book. There's a whole team of people that are waiting in line to take care of the editing and to do all of that kind of stuff for you. So in that sense, there's a lot less think work. The other advantage of going through a publisher, specifically kind of a larger publisher, like Penguin, Random House, and these type of Wiley's and these type of publishers, is distribution. Distribution was one of my big challenges. I published my book in 2015. Of course, there was the Amazon route, which is always great as a distributor, but it's very difficult to get your book into bookstores if you want the book in bookstores. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of authors that self-publish. It's great to have your own book, but to actually get distributors that want to distribute your book. And what I noticed is that if you're not through a publishing house, a lot of distributors don't want to touch your book. So there seems to be this relationship that they have with these publishing houses. They say, hey, listen, if you're not published through that brand of publishing house, we don't want to carry your book in bookstores. So I'm assuming that there are tons and tons of really good books out there that are probably never going to see the daylight in a bookstore. And and that for me was a big challenge, how to overcome that, because that was kind of a bit of a dream for me, as I also wanted my book to be in bookstores. So finding those distributors was really hard. It worked eventually, but there was just so much work that went into that process. When you go through a publishing house, it's a very different story, right? Because they have all of their distributors lined up, and so when the book gets published and the publishing dates, it just gets shipped around the world, and it's just in bookstores all around the world. So there's an advantage there. The other downside about going through a full-fledged publishing house is from a financial split, right? So when you're thinking about the amount of kind of money that a writer makes from a publishing house, generally speaking, the average author only makes about $2 or $3 per book that is being sold. The rest all goes to everybody else. So even though everything's taken care of, it also takes a big chunk of your profit margin. But the good news is, of course, is that you also have much larger distribution. So, the book is spread all around the world. So eventually that does balance itself out. But, those are just some things to think about as an author, which route you would actually want to go through.
The 5 energies of a bad boss. Talk about why you wrote this book and just a small synopsis of the book.
Yeah, it's it's basically a COVID baby. So one of the reasons why I wrote the book during COVID was I really felt that with the change in how we kind of operate, right, with regards to everybody's virtual, all of that kind of stuff, I saw a need in my coaching work with especially with teams in terms of how can they stay connected over this, kind of working, over multiple regions and countries and time zones and all of that kind of stuff. And how can they still feel that connection? And is there a framework there? And just interestingly enough, I've been working in the space of energy for the past 11 years with executives. And again, there really hasn't been kind of any literature out there giving a framework in terms of teaching people how to use their energy, especially from an energy projection and energy connectedness perspective, and applying some science to that as well in terms of how that works. And so I wanted to give that to the world, not just to my own clients, but share that with the world as well, as to say, hey, here's this framework that you can use that can really help you connect better with people, no matter where everybody else is in the world. And so I created this framework that also comes with an assessment. And that framework comes around the 5 energies, which basically is it's parts Western science, and part Asian philosophy, especially dealing with Asian energy practices and things like that. Thinking about in India, Ayurvedic medicine with prana and the chakras, and of course in traditional Chinese medicine we have qi, right, with yin and yang. Those energy relationships have been with us, and especially a lot of indigenous peoples, for example, have been with us for thousands and thousands of years. And so I wanted to create a model that is also kind of easily applicable to to also Western educated people, and so that's why I decided to write the book, and the publisher loved the idea, kind of an East versus West type blend of how to use this understanding of energy projection, and then how we can use that to basically, connect with people in the right way, so everybody can get a lot more done in the shorter amount of time.
Awesome. So can you share just one out of the 5 energies that's negative, and give a suggestion how someone can change today, like not starting in the new year, but today, how they can make changes?
It's the beauty of this is that we all project the energies. There are certain moments in our day where we are projecting at least one of these energies, and it's just being aware of which one we're projecting. One of the challenges is that when we're not aware of what we're projecting, we project what I like to call our default energy, and that's where a lot of managers and leaders get stuck, because they have a tendency to live in just that one energy. And unfortunately, of course, because there are 5, that means that they're only really catering to 20% of the population. So what means is that no matter how good you think you are as a leader, if you don't have that awareness of how you're showing up and what energy you're projecting, there are always going to be people out there who probably think you're a horrible boss, right? So that's the understanding of the 5 energies of horrible bosses, is that we're all horrible bosses if we're not consciously aware of that energy that we're actually bringing to the conversation. And so what those 5 energies are, they're based on, again, on that yin and yang and the chakras. So it's kind of like an east, west, north, and south kind of compass, where we have on that horizontal axis, we have what I like to call determined energy, which is forward moving energy, which is the energy that we push out when we're determined to get things done, and we're very task oriented in that space, and all of that kind of stuff. And the other end of that, of course, is more being in that receiving end, which I like to call inviting energy. So that's where we're more empathetic, we're taking in perspectives from other people, asking people for advice and feedback and all of those kind of things. And then on that north-south axis, we have light and heavy energy. And light energy is about being joyful, carefree, spontaneous, having a good time, having a good laugh, kind of hanging out with people, doing all of that stuff. And then heavy energy is more serious. It's more grounded. It's like, hey, this is a time where we need to stay true to our values, and we need to do what's right, and kind of all of those kind of things. And so the energies that we feel in those spaces are kind of make us feel, whether it's determined or inviting or light or heavy. And then what we have in the middle is what we call neutral energy, which is that 5th energy. And neutral energy is basically mindfulness, right? So when we practice mindfulness meditation and all of that kind of stuff, we're not moving forward, backward, up or down. We're just simply in that space of neutrality. And it's understanding those five energies and where we are at a given time, but also understanding that we can shift our energy at any moment that we feel like it. I can choose to be either in light energy or heavy energy. I can be in any situation I want. I can be, for example, I can be waiting for, I don't know, the train, and the train gets delayed. I can choose to be in heavy energy and kind of, be a little grumpy about it and say, oh, I'm going to be late for work and all of that kind of stuff. Or I can choose to be in light energy and say, well, it gives me more time to have a chat with a person, or, get to have a good time, or whatever it is. And when we change the energy, we also change our thinking, and we change our perspectives, and we change the way that we operate in our own world. So having that understanding in any given moment can be really beneficial and can be very helpful in so many different situations.
So just clarification, So would you say a horrible boss, as far as when you said determination, would be someone who comes in, says this needs to be done, let's get it done, and doesn't ask for questions, doesn't ask for ideas, just get it done? Whereas a good boss would be someone to sit down, let's have a conversation on this project. If you see anything better we could be doing, if you see any challenges, let's have a discussion before we get started. Would you say that would be the difference between the two?
So yes and no. So there are times when, as a leader, being determined is very important. Think about, for example, when COVID broke out. It would have helped the world leaders tremendously to be very determined with regards to acting proactively, right? And acting swiftly. And because there was a large delay in how people responded, that caused a tremendous amount of troubles around the globe. And so there are times when a leader, where it really does serve a leader to say, hey, listen, this is how things are going to be done, and this is what's important, right? So it's not about which energy is bad or which energy is good. It's applying the right energy for the right circumstance. In warfare, for example, I can assume that there are some circumstances where being determined could be very, very helpful, but there are also plenty of circumstances where it isn't, right? So if I'm in a circumstance where, for example, I am feeling determined and I want to push my ideas and whatever, but there are people around me that I need to work with that also want to share their opinions and their ideas, and I don't want to listen to those because all I want to do is move forward, then there's a chance that I can be perceived by my people as being a horrible boss at that moment in time. And the same counts for being inviting. There are plenty of situations and examples of a leader being almost too inviting, right? Where they're taking in too much perspective, but they're actually not making a decision in terms of what we need to do to move forward. So for a leader, it's about kind of using the right energy in the right way, and then shifting that energy in a direction that helps everybody move forward. So that's the awareness of it, and that's what I would say would make the kind of determine what is a great boss versus a not so great boss is the boss who can use their energy in that way and kind of show up in that way and shift their energy where required, rather than just being stuck in one default one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So your first book you wrote, it became a bestseller, and I'm assuming you had no intentions of writing a second book, and then Penguin noticed and asked you to write a second book. Are you in the process of working on a third, or you are not thinking about that at the moment?
I am and I'm not. So I am conceptualizing an idea for a third book. Yes. So it is also in the energy space. But I can't share too much about it right now. But there is definitely some ideas in the works. But the writing of it will probably only start at the end of 2022. So it's I'm in the research phase right now, still for it.
Awesome. So marceldaane.com, I'm sure, is where everyone can go for more information, and I'm assuming it's also on Amazon.
Yes.
Are there any other platforms online where we can find that these books?
So Headstrong Performance, you can find Headstrong Performance pretty much at any online bookstore. So whether it's like Barnes and Noble, if it's whatever the books are, you'll find that as well. It might not be in every bookstore physically, as where of course the Horrible Bosses is available all around the world. It's being shipped right now. So do check in your local bookstore if it's in yet. Otherwise, yes, you can order it also through any online platform, or go to the Penguin Books website. There's also a list of kind of places where you can order it and get it through.
Thank you. And the last question, completely off topic, if you had the opportunity to have a conversation and maybe lunch with a fellow author, whether they be dead or alive, unknown or well-known, who would that author be and why?
Eckhart Tolle. I'd love to have a conversation with Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle is, of course, the author of The Power of Now. He's also a spiritual teacher. Eckhart Tolle's work with regards to mindfulness and being present is absolutely groundbreaking. And I think and I made reference to Eckhart as well in my book as well, especially when we're looking for that neutral energy. It requires a deep level of self-awareness, of being present in the moment, in order for us to be there. Because for us to be neutral, we can't be stuck in our own thoughts of where are we going and what are we trying to do. We have to quiet our minds and remain balanced in our bodies. And that takes some practice. And his book, The Power of Now, if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. But he's definitely somebody I would love to have a conversation with.
That is all the time we have for you today on today's episode of The Ready Writer. I want to thank our guest, Marcel Daane, for stopping on by and sharing. And of course, you, the guest, as always, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a great week.